So in terms of that workshop is going to really open up a lot of different areas that perhaps we might have ignored, working on the requirements alone. So it's important that we, bring it back into that context, get it as much as possible to, to make sure that we improve the requirements, we get it verified, we make it a good quality requirement. If that is the case, then we have achieved our purpose of being a good business analyst. So we work with the domain experts, subject matter experts, and to do that, that's what is important, isn't it? So these are the people who have got loads of years of experience and expertise. So they would be the best people for us to tell what is right, what is wrong. So it's always better to consult the SMEs, the subject matter experts in their own areas who have got that rich insight into how we've captured the requirements. Did we miss anything? Are there any glaring gaps in the requirements? How did we capture it? Are there some problems, some omissions and commissions? They're the best people for us to tell. And we've also, as discussed, we've also got other stakeholders, which include testers, engineers, developers, designers, architects, all of these. So again, we need to have that kind of domain SME, end users, involving the end users and the customers would really help us to get that view. And the implementation SMEs, obviously, as we discussed in all these cases, very important that they get that they provide you with the solution perspective, which perhaps the domain SME might be lacking in some respects, because they're more in terms of identifying and working in the problem space. We also need to work with the project manager. As always, we've understood the important contribution of project managers and the sponsors, and obviously the testers. And the testers play a very, very important role here in the verification of requirements, because they would look at the requirements, they would make sure that if there are any gaps, because they're the people who actually look at it from a very critical view, because they're the people who need to create, they're the team who would need to create the test cases from the requirements. That's the immediate deliverable. So they need to look at it, a requirement, look at it from the point of view of what is the happy day scenario, what could go wrong with this, and identify all the scenarios, all the negative flows, all the errors, exceptions, everything. And they would create that kind of test cases for each requirement. So they would literally look at it with magnifying glass, and they would come up with hundreds of questions. So you as a BA, please be prepared. This from my experience, be prepared to answer, to be able to work more closely with the testers, because they would rip open the requirement document and requirements, because they look at it more from the point of view of destroying the system or the product, whereas the rest of the people in the team are building the product. So I would see this as a kind of different perspectives. The BAs, developers, architects are trying to build the product. They're trying to actually kind of take each and every brick, put that brick as a building block, try and build walls, and then build a house and all that stuff. But whereas the testers come with the perspective of how can things go wrong? What could be wrong with this? How can this product sustain any attacks from outside? If I entered the wrong data, if I entered the pin incorrectly, if I entered if I continuously enter something incorrectly for 15 times, 100 times, what could happen? What could go wrong is how they would look at it. Whereas rest of the team is about looking at the happy day scenario. So it's really important we get all these perspectives when we try and work on the product. Very important, we discuss this acceptance criteria, very, very, very important, because that's what, as we just discussed, the testers would create to be able to assess whether we have got the right build with the right product in the right way. Because this, unless it meets these acceptance and evaluation criteria, you cannot say that this feature or this product has delivered what it was set out for. So it was not meeting the requirement. So the acceptance criteria in the context of Agile, again, we use BDD, a behavior-driven development scenario. So it's like given, when, and then. So we write a series of given, when, then statements. For each requirement, you'll have at least about 10 to 15 to 100, depending on the complexity of that user story. We can write all those happy path or the negative scenarios, alternative flows. We can write so many such acceptance criteria, or these gherkin statements is what we call. So we can do that, and that would be used for testing. And then if it if any of those test cases have failed, if they're not met, that means that the feature has not delivered. So which means that it is not meeting the standards, and it would be sent back as defect. So it's really important we capture the acceptance criteria. We use these criteria for test cases and do the testing thoroughly. Item tracking, I think we've discussed this at length about how the backlog items or the requirements would enter into the backlog, how they get tracked, monitored, and closed all the way through from the stage it becomes a requirement through all the way through the architecture, the design, development, and testing. So this traceability, it really helps a lot with the traceability. Metrics and key performance indicators, again, the critical success factor for a requirement. When can you say that the requirement is done? It's complete, is when you can actually, it meets the acceptance criteria. The feature as a whole is meeting the critical success factor and the key performance indicator. An example for this is the definition of done in the context of Agile. So for each sprint that you would define the definition of done, and you say that, well, this has to be 1, 2, 3, 4. It should go live. It should be in a stage that we're going live with this. It should be tested and completely passing all the acceptance criteria. It should be in a state where it is ready to be deployed into the live server. So let's say these are the 3 criteria. If your build has not met any of these 3 criteria, then that is not done. That means that we have not delivered the sprint. We failed at delivering the sprint. So we need to now investigate what happened, why we could not do that. So it's very important that this kind of metrics, KPIs, and the acceptance criteria are defined well in advance. The team knows about it, and they work towards achieving those. And reviews and the feedback, very important in the context of what we've just discussed. Reviews, peer reviews, reviews with third parties, senior management reviews, all of these would really help us to get to deliver quality software, what we have always wanted to deliver.